right, folks. And last week was a good week of comics. Like, it is great to see the Transformers G.I. Joe crossover that's being done by Skybound and Image. We talked about Transformers #5, but it's also the week for Cobra Commander #2. It's also the week for Ultimate Spider-Man #2. And let me say this about these two books. It makes me want to buy comic books. It makes me want to read the next book. And that's what we all want, right? This Ultimate Spider-Man stuff that's being done by Jonathan Hickman. I'm very torn, of course. I'm not a big fan of the Ultimate Universe stuff, create another Earth, another story arc, things like that. But I enjoy good storytelling, good characters, things I like. I think I enjoy the nuances of a Peter Parker that's older, who was never bitten by a radioactive spider, and now he is, and he doesn't quite know what he's doing. And I think this book works very, very well for all of that. I thought the cover was a little misleading because it kind of implies that it's all about Green Goblin, and that is not the case. Issue #2 is more about Peter as Spider-Man, trying to learn how to be Spider-Man in a generic black suit. We're not going to go through too much, but I give you a little list. Look at the beautiful art. This art is, I'm sure I get Marco Cicchetto's name right here, best I can. Beautiful, beautiful piece. Just beautiful, beautiful piece. It's really about him running into the Shocker and things not going well, which work really well because they're not done in a way to humiliate our character. He's learning what he's doing. He's discussing practice. He's discussing how things aren't going well. His kids are finding out because in this universe, he's married to MJ and they have 2 kids, May and Richard, and they're discussing the Spider-Man is, he's not called Spider-Man yet. He's made the front page. And it is sort of like, what is everybody supposed to think? He's learning powers. The public doesn't know much about him, things like that. Here he crashes. It doesn't go well. And he ultimately runs into, before we get to that, he runs into the Shocker. Before we get to that, probably the worst element of the story is Jonathan Hickman having J. Jonah Jameson and Ben Parker. Now, Uncle Ben's not dead in this universe, right? They're going to venture out on their own because the press is corrupt. The Daily Bugle is basically being owned and basically run by the Kingpin. And they're kind of kicked out. Well, they weren't really kicked. They were kind of forced out, basically. But they're going to start their own company, but they really haven't done that yet. They're going to have this sort of like conversation about it, which is in like a steam bath, like a New York steam bath. It's in a Russian Turkish bath. And I'm like, it's like, I don't know. I think there could have been a more interesting way to have this conversation. That's back and forth. You're setting up that they're sort of like friends and rivals, friendly rivals, things like that. It's all fine. It's all serviceable. But the real stuff is that we actually get some action because issue #1 didn't have a lot of action. In this issue, basically the Shocker kind of dupes poor Peter, not once, but twice. He's struggling with his powers, what to do, what his role will be, all those kinds of things. So Ultimate Spider-Man #2 is probably a better book than even issue #1. So if you're looking for some fun and you don't mind some of those nuances with Marvel and things like that, this is actually one that's actually proved to be, pretty rewarding and pretty entertaining. All right, now on to the star of the week, and that would be Cobra Commander #2. I tell you what, this book, I like Cobra Commander #1. I'm not sure I cared for like the Cobra La backstory and sort of mythos. I don't exactly know all of that stuff from G.I. Joe, so I'm not really trying to, destroy any fandoms or upset anybody, but it got moving pretty well. I like the fact that Cobra Commander is hardcore villain, right? He's rated R. This is actually a book that might be a little rough for like little kids. They don't shy away from that. And here we'll take a couple peeks here. There's blood. They have these 2 guys that are tied to a chair. They pull out a chainsaw, and there's blood. There's chaos, right? So how could you possibly one up the Cobra Commander as the villain? It's put him in a situation like this, and then you have this sort of like they're at this like fair breaks and things like that work really, really well. There's a little jab later on about the authority and those kinds of things. So I really, really love the back and forth, the tension breakers of this book because it is hardcore. We have a lot of flashbacks here now, feeling in the Cobra Law stuff. And then, of course, just the idea of just the violence and the graphic nature of the book. They are not going to shy away from going there in this book. And this is actually very refreshing. Cobra Commander being face to face with Dreadnoks is fantastic. It's intense. It's graphic. and just makes me want another comic book. I have to be honest, I was loving it. So there's tons of other things that have been pretty good to read. I got to bounce over to the wrap up for Blood Covenant. Dropping right now when you're seeing this is we're going to have a new Conan book, number 8, and we're going to get in the first Savage Sword of Conan. We are also going to continue to just get more good stuff. And I think this is the surprise, is that there are things now that are kind of bubbling to the top, and DC is the one that's falling further and further behind. X-Men is being completely redone, reshaped, so we'll see what kind of transpires there. I will say on the Marvel side, Incredible Hulk's not been terrible. Ghost Rider is not totally unreadable, but it's just not like OG Ghost Rider. On the DC side, Green Lantern was pretty good for a while. I've kind of gotten less interested in that, but I will say